The media has been absolutely horrendous in reporting what's going on in Ukraine with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I actually want to say print outlets have done a much better job. Now there are, and we'll do a separate segment on this a little bit later today, but there are, the wartime propaganda has gotten through almost everywhere. So there are things that are just flat out not true, they're incorrect, or they're lies, and they've been reported on as if it's factual. We gave a number of examples of them the other day. And so that's why I want everybody to be very skeptical from anything that's on the ground. Any like on the ground reporting in the middle of a hot war, suspect at best. If something feels just a little bit fishy, it is fishy. So be skeptical. Understand everything's with a massive grain of salt. But for the most part, print outlets, in my opinion, have done a decent job. But who hasn't done a decent job is all of the usual suspects. You know, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Fox News has pivoted now hard right, and they're all in on Vladimir Putin as Hitler and literally anything can and should be done to him. And us pushing for a bellicose, hawkish, neoconservative, militaristic reaction, it has no negative consequences. It's not like it's an unstable, erratic dude who has nuclear weapons and, is currently listening to what everybody's saying. No, it's not that. It's we can say whatever we want and get away with it and it's totally fine. That's like the mindset on Fox News. But you know who else is acting like this? MSNBC. Now, these networks have done a terrible job explaining very basic things like what a no-fly zone is. A no-fly zone right now polls very popular in the U.S. Americans want the U.S. to do a no-fly zone in Ukraine. Why? Because nobody explains to the American people, except independent media, new media, hey, a no-fly zone is World War III. That's when we actively shoot down Russian planes. Direct military combat between the United States and Russia, two giant nuclear-armed powers. Are you sure that's what you want, given that that's what a no-fly zone is? When you tell the American people that, I'm sure they flip and they go, no, whoa, I don't want that. I just wanted a no-fly zone. Well, what's a no-fly zone? It sounds like you press a button and create a force field, or you scramble the technology inside a Russian jet so they don't know where to bomb anymore or something. That's not what it is. It's an act of war. So the media's done a terrible job getting this stuff through. But here's an even worse example of just how off the rails some of this coverage is. This is Morning Joe, MSNBC, talking about the conflict. And look at how flippant they are with the prospect of potential nuclear war.
I spoke yesterday to several senior administration officials in previous administrations, and I was struck by how many of them understood that the United States should not introduce troops to NATO, should not have a no-fly zone because of what that would provoke. But I did hear quiet criticism, something that they said they would not say publicly, but quiet criticism that the United States should not recoil every time Vladimir Putin or his foreign minister wave the bloody flag of basically nuclear brinkmanship. When we are silent, when we back down, when we capitulate to that, they suggest that we actually make it more likely that Putin sees us as weak and that he's more likely to use nuclear weapons. And their suggestion is to call his bluff and speak about the consequences of nuclear weapons and the consequences for the Russian people and to not just, again, be seen to be capitulating. I'm curious what you think, because, again, we're not dealing with a Soviet Politburo, which in its own way is conservative with a small c. We're dealing with a single man that has more power than any Russian leader since Stalin. And he seems, like Stalin, to be unbalanced.
Just look at this convoy here. This is not the vaunted Russian military that I learned about. Look at the spacing between these vehicles. They are literally telling all the world, we're not worried about NATO because we know you won't use your air power. We know that you won't hit a major logistical hub like this. And it also tells us that even despite all of this combat power, they haven't solved the big three classes of supply. food, fuel, and ammunition. They really haven't been able to do this. They're not trained. They're not built like the U.S. military. They struggle in this. And so I think just this convoy, this photo is indicative that he thinks he can use those three things, nuclear, cyber, and disinformation, to really put the West on its heels so that we are somewhat off balance and we won't go that extra step. So I think it's time to call his bluff, but I also think it's time to create a parallel negotiation strategy to work both with the people inside Russia and with the oligarchs.
That is a massive contradiction. You can't, quote unquote, call his bluff, but then also do diplomacy. That's not the way it works. If you're calling his bluff and what, bombing the convoy, that is an act of war, an act of aggression that raises the stakes, raises the tensions, provokes a response. You can't on the one hand do that and then turn around and say, yeah, I'm open to talk to you and we'll see what kind of a thing we could work out. No, the whole point of the talking is so that it doesn't come to bombing and direct military conflict between these two nuclear armed powers. So that made absolutely no sense. Now, look at the rest of the arguments that were made there. So at one point, both Morning Joe and this guy say, oh, we should call his bluff. But then Morning Joe also says, Joe Scarborough says, he's genuinely unbalanced. Wait. That's a contradiction too. You can't say, man, this guy's unbalanced and erratic and Lord only knows what he's going to do. And also we should call his bluff. No, if it's a bluff, that presupposes he still has his faculties. That presupposes he's still acting rationally. That presupposes he is balanced, not unbalanced. So how did you not spot the contradiction? And Joe Scarborough said it like back to back. He was like, people are saying maybe we should call his bluff, but also, hey, he's kind of like Stalin. He's pretty unbalanced. He's not a rational actor. Well, if he's not a rational actor, then it's not a bluff. It's unbelievable that these people are on TV talking about complex geopolitics and they discuss it as flippantly as they do. The dumbest part, by far, is, hey, I've heard a lot of quiet criticism in D.C. that the United States should not recoil at the nuclear brinksmanship that's happening. And then Scarborough says, they say we make it more likely that Putin sees us as weak and uses nuclear weapons against us if we back down. So this is the quiet criticism on Capitol Hill. There's a reason why nobody's saying that publicly, because it's literally the dumbest thing anybody's ever said in human history. So if we make clear, hey, there's no boots on the ground, and if we make clear we are not going to get into a military confrontation with Russia, if we make that clear, we're actually more at risk of a nuclear strike. If he doesn't feel in any way, shape, or form threatened by the West, then he would never launch the nukes. In order for him to launch the nukes, he would have to feel like, I'm totally in a corner and there's no off-ramp, there's no way out. But they flip it. They act like, well, actually, if we were to be aggressive and we were to bomb the convoy and we were to go after him, that would make it less likely that he uses nukes. So if we do a direct act of war against Russia, that somehow makes nuclear war less likely. No. What makes nuclear war less likely is to say, in no uncertain terms, military conflict is off the table. We can't risk it. Both of us have more nuclear weapons than we know what to deal with. We know how this spirals out of control and where it leads to. So sorry, we can't do it. We just can't do it. Can't do it. Sorry, Ukraine. There's not going to be a no-fly zone. Sorry, there's going to be no U.S. boots on the ground. Sorry, you're not getting into NATO. All of these things, I feel bad for the people of Ukraine, but all of these things are absolutely necessary to make sure you don't go anywhere near a conversation about nuclear war. But a bunch of idiots are literally claiming the opposite. Like, actually, no, the more aggressive you are, the less likely he is to use nuclear weapons. I mean, it's a joke. It's a joke. And then you got the other guy basically prodding the U.S. and NATO like, hey, the convoy's just sitting there. I mean, there's the Sean Hannity point that we talked about. Why don't we just do World War III and then pretend like we didn't do it? This guy's like, well, look, the convoy's just sitting there. They're taunting the West and saying, you're not strong enough to do it. No, I think it would really be, you're not stupid enough to do it, because then you are risking World War III. We can't do an act of war entering us into World War III and then get mad and get shocked at some sort of retaliation. And by the way, we would do exactly that. If we launch some sort of attack where we get involved militarily and then there's a response, which there would be, be like, oh my God, I can't believe you responded. It's unbelievable. So this is MSNBC saying call his bluff on nuclear war and nuclear brinksmanship. Let me ask you guys a question. Even if there's a 2% chance of us doing something and that leading to a nuclear war, do you want to take that risk? Or would you rather have the chance, the likelihood at like 0.0001%? Let me ask you. I know what every rational person out there is saying. I know what every single rational person out there is saying. There's no way you could say, yeah, I'd rather have a 2% chance. You ever played poker before? You ever, had somebody that you're up against has like a 2% chance going to the river card and then they hit it? It's not unheard of. It happens 2 out of 100 times. So let's not roll the dice. Let's not risk it. But here we are. This is the commentary you hear on MSNBC. And you wonder why some of the polling is like, out of whack and people want to overreach in the sanctions. Look, I'm for every sanction imaginable against Putin and the oligarchs, but as soon as you start hurting regular Russian citizens, I'm out because they didn't do anything wrong. But, we're in a war hysteria mode right now. This is MSNBC calling for raising the stakes for a nuclear war and pretending like that would make us safer. I can't believe anybody listens to these people and takes them seriously. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.